The air here does not smell of sanctuary. It smells of dust, of diesel fumes, and of the dry, baking heat that rises from the asphalt of the borderlands. It is a harsh, unforgiving landscape, a place defined by lines drawn on maps and fences cutting through the scrub. But close your eyes for a moment, and a different scent cuts through the arid desolation. The rich, earthy aroma of simmering lentils, the sharp tang of ginger, and the warm, wholesome smell of freshly baked bread. Open your eyes, and the scene before you seems almost hallucinatory against the backdrop of surveillance towers and concertina wire. Here, on the sun-baked ground, a rhythm of service is unfolding that predates the very nations represented by this border. Dozens of volunteers, many distinguishable by their turbans and bright vests, are moving with practiced efficiency. They stir massive steel pots that seem large enough to feed an army, though the army gathered here is one of the weary and the displaced. This is not a government checkpoint, nor is it a sterile NGO distribution center. This is a Langar, a Sikh community kitchen manifesting on the fringes of American soil. Men, women, and children, their faces etched with the exhaustion of journeys that have spanned continents, are invited to sit. They sit not in interrogation rooms, but on simple mats or the bare earth, arranged in straight rows. This arrangement is the pangat, a physical structure of equality where no one stands above another, and everyone waits their turn to be served. The volunteers, hailing from organizations like Khalsa Aid or local gurdwaras that may be hundreds of miles away, move down the lines. They ladle hot dal and hand out roti, with a reverence usually reserved for handling sacred artifacts. In the Sikh tradition, this is exactly what is happening. This is Seva, selfless service. But to call it volunteering is to miss the theological weight of the act. In the eyes of these servers, they are not merely feeding hungry migrants. They are serving the divine spark that resides within each of them. The act of feeding is an act of worship, as potent and necessary as any prayer recited in a temple. This pop-up kitchen operates on the ancient tripartite principle of the Sikh faith: Nam Japna, remembering the divine name; Kirat Karni, earning an honest living; and here, most visibly, Vand Chakna, sharing the fruits of one's labor with others. It is a radical disruption of the logic of the border. Borders are designed to filter, to separate, to classify who belongs and who does not. The Langar recognizes no such distinction. It asks for no identification, requires no pledge of allegiance, and demands no conversion. The only qualification to sit at this table is hunger. As you watch a volunteer kneel to offer water to a dehydrated traveler, you are witnessing an embodied theology. It is a faith that refuses to remain abstract, demanding instead to get its hands dirty, to stand in the heat, to cook, and to serve. It forces us to confront a startling reality, that in this desolate strip of land, often characterized by political rhetoric as a site of crisis and lawlessness, one of the world's oldest and most radical experiments in human equality is quietly taking place. But to understand the true depth of this hospitality, we must look beyond this dusty roadside and travel back 5 centuries to the fertile plains of Punjab, where a revolutionary guru first commanded that before one could pray, one must first sit and eat. To understand the steam rising from those pots at the border, we must transport ourselves to the chaotic, stratified world of 15th century Punjab. It was a time and place where social hierarchy was not just a norm, but a divine ordinance. The caste system dictated every interaction: who you could touch, where you could live, and most importantly, with whom you could eat. Food was a fortress, guarded by strict laws of purity and pollution. A high-caste Brahmin would never dream of breaking bread with a peasant, let alone an untouchable. Into this rigid social geometry stepped Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, with a simple yet earth-shattering proposition. He declared, "Accept all humans as your equals, and let them be your only sect." Guru Nanak didn't just preach this equality, he institutionalized it through food. He established the Langar, the free community kitchen, as a non-negotiable cornerstone of the faith. The Janam Sikhs, the biographical accounts of the Guru's life, tell us that when his father gave him money to start a business, Nanak instead spent it feeding hungry holy men, an event known as the Sacha Sauda, or true bargain. He argued that there was no better investment than filling the empty stomachs of one's fellow human beings. But the true revolution was in the eating. Nanak mandated that anyone who wished to see him must first sit in the pangat and eat in the langar. Kings and beggars, men and women, Brahmins and Shudras, all were made to sit on the same level floor. In a society obsessed with status, sitting on the ground was a profound equalizer. It stripped away the external trappings of rank. When you are sitting cross-legged holding a plate, you are not a monarch or a merchant. You are simply a human with a body that needs nourishment. The Langar destroyed the social barriers of the time by physically forcing bodies into a posture of humility and community. This was, and remains, a theological statement derived from the Mool Mantra, the opening verse of the Guru Granth Sahib. It begins with Ek Onkar, there is one God. If there is only one creator, then humanity is singular. There are no children of a lesser God. Therefore, to hoard food while another starves is not just a moral failing, it is a spiritual error, a denial of the oneness of creation. The kitchen became a laboratory for the soul, a place where the ego is ground down along with the spices. The ingredients served in the langar were by design simple and vegetarian, usually lentils, bread, and pudding. This ensured that no dietary restriction, whether religious or cultural, would prevent anyone from partaking. It was a table set for the entire world. The Sangat, or holy congregation, was forged not just in the chanting of hymns, but in the passing of water jugs and the sharing of bread. This tradition was codified by the successive gurus, with the third guru, Amar Das, famously refusing an audience with the Mughal Emperor Akbar until the emperor had first sat on the floor and eaten with the commoners. Thus, the langar was never just a charity. Charity often implies a hierarchy, a benevolent giver, and a grateful receiver. Langar implies a partnership in humanity. It is a rights-based approach to spirituality, asserting that food, dignity, and community are the birthright of every soul. It is the centuries-old blueprint for a casteless, borderless society that has now been transported to the modern geopolitical divide, challenging our contemporary definitions of who belongs at our table. Returning to the borderlands, the face of the migrant receiving a plate of hot food takes on a new resonance. We are not just watching a transaction of calories, we are witnessing a collision of worldviews. On one side, we have the modern nation-state, defined by its right to exclude, to draw lines, and to determine who is a legal entity and who is an alien. On the other side, holding a ladle, is the worldview of Langar, defined by the imperative to include, to erase lines, and to see only the human form. The simple act of sharing a meal in this context becomes a profound political and ethical statement. It bypasses the tangled debates about immigration quotas, asylum laws, and national security. It cuts through the rhetoric that often dehumanizes the migrant, reducing them to a statistic or a threat. When a volunteer looks a tired traveler in the eye and serves them, they are acknowledging a shared existence. They are saying, you exist, you matter, and you deserve to be sustained. For someone who has spent weeks or months being treated as unwanted cargo, this restoration of dignity is perhaps more nourishing than the food itself. This practice is rooted in the Sikh prayer of sarbat da bhala, a request for the welfare of all. Note the lack of caveats. It does not ask for the welfare of the faithful, or the citizens, or the righteous. It asks for the welfare of all. This creates a universal obligation that transcends geography. In a globalized world where we are often encouraged to build walls, both physical and emotional, to protect what is ours, Langar proposes a radical alternative, that our security and spiritual well-being are intrinsically tied to the well-being of the stranger at the gate. Migrants who have encountered these kitchens often speak of the shock of unconditional kindness. In a journey defined by exploitation, by smugglers, by cartels, by corrupt officials, the Langar stands as an anomaly. It asks for nothing in return. This gratuity is the key. It disrupts the transactional nature of the modern world. It is a reminder that there are things that cannot be bought or sold, only given. The presence of Langar at the border forces us to engage in a comparative theological reflection. What does it mean to be a neighbor in the 21st century? Many religious traditions command the faithful to feed the hungry, but the institutionalized, indiscriminate nature of Langar offers a unique model for humanitarian ethics. It suggests that the solution to our crises of belonging is not to narrow our identity, but to expand our table. It challenges the scarcity mindset that says there is not enough to go around, countering it with the abundance of the community kitchen, which somehow, miraculously, always seems to have enough for one more person. As the sun sets over the desert, casting long shadows across the makeshift dining area, the line of people continues to move. The pots are refilled. The fire is stoked. In this repetition, we see a defiance of despair. The Langar at the border is a silent sermon, preaching that while we may be divided by documents and decrees, we are united by the fundamental human need for bread and belonging. It stands as a testament that, even in the harshest of wastelands, the human spirit, fueled by an ancient faith, can build bridges where others see only walls.